I hope the microphones can pick me up. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Council of the Town of Wainfleet council meeting for this evening. Tonight we have a very special occasion. We have a gentleman here who has won a contest and will be sworn in as mayor for the day. So before we start the meeting, we're doing the swearing in ceremony first. Would you please take the Bible in your hand? Declaration of office. I, Blake Schutten, having been elected or appointed to the office of mayor for a day in the municipality of the Township of Wainfleet, do solemnly promise and declare that 1. I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability. 2. I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or in any other improper manner. 3. I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And 4. I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And I make this solemn declaration conscientiously, believing it to be true and acknowledging that it is of the same force and effect if made under oath. Do you so swear?
I do.
Thank you. We just need your signature now. I have a black pen for you. So I need your signature right there, please. And I'm going to get you to sign one more time. Right there, please. And I just need to sign here and here. I have to sign and seal these. Records. And this one is for you, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And now it is my honor to bestow upon our mayor for the day the official chain of office.
At this time, I would like to invite my family members to come up and take photos. I, Mayor Blake Schutten, for the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet, call this regular meeting of council held on November 12, 2019, to order. Please rise for our national anthem.
Okay, the land acknowledgement statement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and One Spoon Treaty. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest, general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none. Presentations, we have none. So I'll go into the mayor's remarks. So Mayor for a Day Schutten was one of 13 applicants. We went to all the schools, and I invited all grade 6s, 7s, and 8s to participate in the first Mayor for a Day contest in Wainfleet, and Mayor Schutten was the winner. And before his poster was on there, and it was an excellent, there it is, excellent poster. It really caught our eye, and it was excellent. So today we started off here at the 11:30 here at the office, and we did some office work. Representative of my day, we then went to the region. We met Chair Bradley at the region, and we discussed how the region works. From there, we went to the Niagara Regional Police Headquarters, because I'm on the Police Service Board, so it's just part of my day. So we went down there, we met the Chief of Police, and we had a bit of a tour. We were in the 911 Center and the Real-Time Operations Center, and we could have seen a lot more, but we ran out of time. Then we went and solved a community issue here, which is something that we do all the time, every day. and Mayor Schutten did an excellent job at helping to resolve that problem, coming up with solutions. Then we had a meal together before council and discussed the evening, how it works, and so it was a very representative day of life in the mayor, so I think it was an excellent opportunity for him to learn. We had 13 other students, and I'd like to commend them for submitting their applications. They were all very good, and it was tough to narrow down the last few. So there's definitely some, we sent letters out to all of them thanking them as well. So this has gone really well. I've been very pleased and looking forward, I would think, to doing it again next year. So thank you very much for that, Mayor Blake, and your duties as mayor for a day are now complete. Okay, moving on to mayor's remarks. Please note, our meeting proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the Township website and YouTube. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to our fire department and public works staff for their efforts during and since the Halloween storm, as well as our residents for their resilience throughout. We will continue to post updates for the public as the situation progresses. On that note, I continue to get emails and phone calls from the public, and we're referring everybody to our website, and through there they can send emails and register their damage and their information with us that way. Our CAO and I will be attending a roundtable discussion, I think tomorrow, with provincial representatives, and we'll be engaging municipal leaders regarding ways to have cost reduction and cost savings. So we don't have too much of an agenda on that, how that's going to look, but it's tomorrow morning, I believe. Regional Council meets this Thursday. Police Service Board meets this Thursday at headquarters, and our next regular meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, December 3rd. I would like to commend our staff for all the work that went into our Remembrance Day ceremony as well. It was an excellent ceremony. We changed some things up this year, and I received a lot of very, very positive feedback. So I'd just like to congratulate all the staff that worked on that and made that come to fruition. And also the other thing, our committees have been posted on the website, our 2 committees. So far, we haven't received too many applications. So if you're out there and you're interested, and you want to apply for one of those committees, please go to our website. The application forms are on that website, or you can come in the office here and get one, but please do so in the next few days. Are there any remarks or discussion from councillors? Anything you'd like to speak to? Councillor Quidlin?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Just a couple things. I attended the Niagara South Federation AGM, and they've officially merged with Niagara North. I also went to the Niagara Region Official Plan Public Information Session. There are 4 of them, so there's 2 more left. I would encourage residents to go out to those maybe. And there's a regular NPCA board meeting. The next one is Wednesday, November 20th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, comments? Okay. We're going to move on to the adoption of previous council minutes. Now, before we do that, as promised, procedurally, we're going to speak to the issue of chickens and bylaw with chickens. So it continues to be present. I continue to receive emails about it, about the public meeting, about all sorts of people concerned about there's no chickens allowed in Wainfleet, And so at this time, I put some thoughts down, and we're going to have a discussion here. And council, I'll go first, and then the councillors can jump in. So there was a lot of internet chat about no chickens being allowed in Wainfleet. That is not correct. Chickens are allowed in all the agricultural areas of Wainfleet, just not in the hamlets. And there, as I say, there's lots of information out there, misinformation, that chickens, everything else is going to get banned out in Wainfleet. No, it's just in the hamlets. In 1979, 40 years ago, council approved a bylaw prohibiting chickens and all livestock in our hamlets. That prohibition has not changed. The accumulated wisdom of 14 consecutive councils have kept that bylaw in place for 40 years. And chickens and livestock have been prohibited in our hamlets. So people in Wainfleet appreciate the ability to govern themselves as much as possible, and a complaint-driven bylaw system of enforcement was established so that many issues could be addressed by the residents involved. By doing it this way, chickens, while not legal in the hamlets, continue to be kept by some residents with mutual respect and agreement between them and their neighbors, resulting in no complaints and therefore no enforcement. Discretion to self-correct, according to mutual respect and tradition, has always been valued in Wainfleet, and I believe continues to be a very important approach in our community. Approaches such as this are very common in all aspects of law. For example, most people on speed on Highway 3 often doing 90 or more, even though the speed limit is 80. Police officers will sit by and watch you go by at 85 or 90 and will not take any enforcement. When someone begins to take advantage of the situation and drives too fast or erratically, endangering other drivers, enforcement takes place. But if you ask a police officer what's the speed limit, they can and only will say 80 kilometers an hour. So apply that to our chicken bylaw. The enforcement of a bylaw is undertaken when mutual agreement between neighbors breaks down and council is needed to rebalance that situation. That's what's happened here. One incident in 40 years where two neighbors have gotten into a dispute about chickens. Chickens have been in the hamlets for years and years, and the neighbors have not complained, and so it has worked. It self-balances. So we should carry on officially with 40 years of chickens being prohibited in the hamlets, but really let the neighbors work it out amongst themselves whether chickens are present or not. Don't forget, the township only needs to get involved if a complaint is received. Respect between neighbors is a long-standing Wainfleet tradition, and I believe being respectful of your neighbors will continue to work in this situation. So let us, council, township, deal with the situation where it has broken down, one situation in 40 years, and we will use the bylaw to remedy that situation. So I personally see no need for a public meeting. I see no need to change our bylaws if we can apply the above standards. As well, if we make chickens official in our hamlets, there will be a number of binding rules that will take away the discretion that residents now have with their chickens. And I know in Wainfleet, more rules are not what is wanted. So in summary, the 40-year prohibition on chickens in the hamlets is still in place. We voted on that at the last council meeting, and we agreed to maintain it. 14 consecutive councils have not changed that bylaw. The township will only become involved in any violation if we receive a complaint. If we can be respectful of our neighbors, we should never receive any complaints. A balance will be reached. And no roosters. That, no matter what, is a great way to annoy your neighbors. So that is a solution, a possible solution that myself and a couple of the staff came up with the other day. We actually said, why has it been 40 years without an issue? Why all of a sudden has this become, all over the internet and everybody's, taking sides about chickens? So what it has been is like the speeding issue. There's officially no chickens in the hamlet, but there are chickens in the hamlet. If nobody complains, it works out. So it's about being respectful to your neighbors, working it out with your neighbors, and there's no issues. So to complicate it by having public meetings by changing the bylaw. And the bylaw, if we change that, it gets very complicated. There's a lot of time involved. There'll be more rules that we don't want. And so I would make the suggestion, and this is just myself, let's go back to the way it's been for 40 years, maintain the prohibition, and let the neighbors work it out if they have chickens or not. And we ask that you allow us, the township, to deal with this one situation that has broken down, and we get that finished. I'm sure we'll have another 40 years where we don't have any issues with the chickens. That's my thoughts. I would like to invite comments or conversation by the councillors. Councillor McClellan.
I think you and staff have done an excellent job of putting this up. I totally agree with it. I think we should leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Councillor Van Vliet.
I would have to echo your statement as well. What we didn't note at the last meeting, that there's a huge cost to changing that bylaw as well. I think it's in the ballpark of $7,500. I think it's working, the bylaw that we have, so I would agree with you.
Any other comments? So as it stands right now, the bylaw was upheld last time, no chickens in the hamlets. If there's any other comments, it's a good time to have that now. If not, then that prohibition in the hamlets remains. Please bear in mind the comments that we just talked about. I think it's very appropriate and a great way to resolve the problem. Two neighbors get along, work it out, figure it out, it works. And it's the best way to make it work, because then the township doesn't have to get involved. And you know, when we come into town, we see ducks out on the lawn here sometimes, and nobody complains, and it's fine. So that is my thought. With some of the very learned folks that work here at the township, we came up with that last week, and we said, like, how come we've gone 40 years without an issue with the chickens here? And then all of a sudden, it's just one incident where the neighbors broke down. That relationship broke down over the chickens. We're working on that. We're going to fix it. And so I just ask that all the rhetoric on the internet go away, because it's just, I mean, at one point somebody was talking about banning cows in Wainfleet and everything else. It just got crazy. So I'd like to invite any other comments. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I mean, I can't argue with anything that you said, and you're right. It is just a problem between neighbors. I just think that we could have mitigated a lot of the unrest in the community if we'd have had some form of a meeting. And unfortunately, after the fact, we sort of thought, when I was chatting with the CAO, maybe we could have had an informal meeting that wouldn't have necessarily been linked to leading us on into changing the bylaw. And quite frankly, my only comment at the last meeting was just to initiate the concept of having the public meeting and letting them have their say. I didn't make any reference to whether I think that there should be chickens in, out, or anywhere. So it was merely a process-driven comment on my part to move us towards option one. I think that if possibly we'd have had a little more time to think about the whole matter, we could have had a very informal meeting like we do twice a year and fleshed out a lot of these comments that you just brought up. And as I said, your comments are right on. I just think we kind of missed the runway on process principle and maybe a little bit of common sense. That's all, and that's what stirred up a lot of people. So, but again, it's certainly out of my hands. I mean, the motion was passed. It is, and only the majority can bring a motion to reconsider it. So there's nothing more for me to say.
Thank you for that. One of the reasons I felt very compelled to bring this up is because I continue to receive emails and phone calls and people discussing it and the rhetoric that was out there on social media. So I just felt it was very important to address this issue again, and I'm hoping that people understand that, hey, you can get along with your neighbors and two of you or three of you agree to have chickens, we don't care. It's not something that we're going to jump into as a bylaw enforcement, because our bylaw enforcement is reactive, not proactive. So as has been done for 40 years, chickens have been had in the hamlets, neighbors have worked it out, and it's worked. So I just don't see that we need to do any changing to that. Councillor Van Vliet's point is also accurate. It's very expensive, time-consuming. The bylaw is huge. We have to change bylaws within the hamlets, and really, it's got a perfect balance point right now, the way it's been for 40 years. So that's all I'm just saying. I think it works great. So, Councillor Crillon, do you have comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, like Councillor Gilmore, we can't make a change from having the way we voted, but I think in this particular case, the one piece that's maybe helped us is that we have made a decision on the enforcement policy to continue to be reactive. So, you know, the history you're referring to is something, wherever it shows up, preserving history seems to align quite well. But in this particular case, I would have still liked to see chickens and work that through. And, you know, new ideas are going to come to us. And I agree that a public session might have helped us further as well. But thank you for extra comments.
Okay, so hopefully the public out there has a clear understanding of what we've said here. You can officially not have chickens, but if you have chickens and no one complains, the township is not interested in pursuing anything there. If a complaint arises, then we must enforce the bylaw. That's the black and white of it right there. So, okay, so we will move on to the adoption of our previous minutes. Any discussion or comment on the last meeting's minutes? Okay, seeing none, those minutes are adopted. Okay, now we're on to a public meeting. And I look to our planner to speak to that, please. Sorry, I guess I'm supposed to read that part. Okay, purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to provide more information about the applications and an opportunity for public input. No recommendations are provided at the public meeting, and the Township Council will not be making any decision at this meeting. A recommendation report will be prepared by staff and presented at a subsequent meeting of Township Council following a full review of the application. As a member of the public, you are welcome to request to be notified of any future public or council meetings regarding this matter. Please provide your contact information on the sign-in sheet located at the back of the council chambers. Please be advised that the sign-in information will form part of the public record for these applications. And I look to the planner for comment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a township-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for a township-owned property in Chambers Corners, located at 42143 Highway 3. The property is approximately 2 hectares in size and contains a single detached dwelling, agricultural building, and a pond. The single detached dwelling is to be removed, and the agricultural building will be modified to provide storage for the fire department. So the official plan amendment proposes to redesignate part of the subject property from village commercial to institutional, and that's to permit a future joint fire and emergency services facility. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the same part of the property from Development D and Hamlet Commercial C2 to a public P zone under zoning bylaw 58178. And again, that's to permit the future joint fire and emergency services facility. So in support of the application, a few documents were submitted for consideration and included a justification report prepared by our fire chief, a topographic survey, geotechnical investigation, a traffic brief, and a concept plan, site plan. So these are currently undergoing staff and agency review and will be discussed in the forthcoming staff report. The concept plan submitted with the application is conceptual and was only intended to give council and the public an idea of how the property may be used. A future site plan application will be required once the building design and site layout have been finalized, and both of those items are to be approved by council. In terms of agency and public comments received to date, we did circulate a notice of the public meeting on October 21st to adjacent landowners and various external agencies and township departments. Applications or comments received to date include the Ministry of Transportation. They noted no objection in principle to the proposed amendments. They did note that the subject property is within their permit control area, and they did outline detailed requirements for the future building permit and site plan submissions. Late last week, we received comments from Niagara Region Planning and Development Services staff, and they are supportive of the proposed amendments from a regional and provincial perspective, as the proposed facility aligns with the intent of provincial and regional policy, which directs public service facilities to be strategically located in settlement areas. Any comments received after the public meeting will be included in the forthcoming staff report.
Thank you. Questions from council, please. Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know Sarah said that this was conceptual. There is a draft here that we saw that isn't shown here that shows a building of 13,500 square feet. I hope that's only conceptual and not what we're proposing, because that is way out of size.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McClellan, it is just conceptual at this point in time. So the fire department will have to look at the space that they need in terms of how many bays, space for offices, training room, that sort of thing. And all of those details will be forthcoming in a design RFP, which council will have to approve the initiation of. So council will ultimately have the final say on square footage, and will review the RFPs along with staff's recommendation in terms of the final building design and how it will be situated on the property.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, request or comment or questions or input from the gallery, please. Now is your opportunity to speak to this. Again, anybody wish to speak to this issue, now is the time to come up to the front of the podium. Okay, seeing none. Next steps, please, planner.
So a recommendation report regarding the applications will be brought forward at a later date. Right now, the target for that is the next meeting of council, the December 3rd meeting. In terms of appeal rights, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submission to the township regarding the proposed amendments before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the applications, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decisions of the township to the local planning appeal tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting and or make written submissions to the township regarding the proposed amendments before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval of the applications, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so.
Okay, so in closing, if you wish to be notified of the decision of the Corporation of the Township of Wainfleet in respect of the proposed applications, you must make a written request to the clerk of the Township of Wainfleet at the address noted below and quote the appropriate file numbers. And that concludes that part of the public meeting. Okay, we'll move on to our staff reports. And ASR 029-2019, I believe our CAO is going to speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this staff report is providing information about a regular annual practice of municipalities across the province to authorize the establishment of an interim tax bill for the following year. Basically, an interim tax bill is a bill that is issued by municipalities to start collecting money early in the year from its taxpayers prior to receiving final requisitions for dollars from the school boards, from the region, and other levels of government. The tax bill itself is set up as 2 installments, representing 50% of last year's taxes. And what this does is permit some cash flow to start coming into the municipality so that we can start paying the bills that we have coming in prior to final budgets being approved and final requisitions coming in. Once again, just a regular annual housekeeping type request.
Okay, any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, recommendation is that this report be received, that the interim tax levy installment due dates be set as February 28th, 2020 and April 30th, 2020, and that staff be directed to bring the attached draft bylaw, being a bylaw to provide for interim tax levies for 2020 in the Township of Wainfleet, to the next regular meeting of council for consideration. Do we have a mover for that, please? Councillor McCollum, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, the next admin staff report is ASR 30-2019, and I think I'll ask the CAO to speak to that as well.
And again, similar to the previous report, this report is recommending a regular routine borrowing authorization in the event that the township experiences invoicing or requirements to pay bills that we haven't yet collected money to pay them. So what this does, in accordance with Section 407, I believe, of the Municipal Act, is it allows us to borrow temporarily just the amount of funds we need to get over the hump until the money starts rolling in through those interim tax bills. So that could cover anything from unexpected supplies, for example, if we need sand for the roads because we have an unexpected storm that depletes all our reserves, that sort of thing. So once again, just a routine housekeeping type bylaw that's enacted by councils every year.
Okay, any questions from any councillors? Okay, seeing none, recommendation is that this report be received and that staff be directed to bring the attached draft bylaw, being a bylaw to authorize borrowing from time to time, allowing the Township of Wainfleet to meet current expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, to the next regular meeting of council for consideration. And one more comment from the CAO.
Just one more comment. We don't borrow unless we absolutely positively have to, so we don't incur any expenses unless we need to, and that will happen only with council's consideration.
Okay, so may I have a mover for that? Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor, and that is carried. Okay, we're looking now at our website update, ASR 31-2019. And Mr. CAO, would you like to speak to that?
3 in a row this evening.
Yes.
By all means. For the 2019 calendar year, during budget deliberations, staff proposed an update to the township's website. Over the course of the summer, staff had some spare time and began a process of reviewing best practice websites that are out and about in the municipal world. In doing so, we were drawn to one company that seemed to have sort of be the leading edge of website design for municipalities and public sector type entities. We met with them. We received a bit of an explanation of their process and their design ethics, and we thought it was a great fit for the Township of Wainfleet, and we requested they provide a proposal. Around that same time, we received notification from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario that the designer that we had sort of highlighted as perhaps a best fit for us had actually also gone through a competitive process with AMO and had been identified as a preferred partner for Ontario municipalities. So at this stage, we've got a formal proposal from them to do our website. And what we are requesting is that council waive our routine purchasing requirements, which would require 3 quotations, to allow us to sole source the website with this AMO preferred partner. And the total project cost that we have comes in at $22,100, which is slightly above our 2019 budget figure, which we had only allocated $12,500 for. As an important note, even though we only allocated that amount for 2019, 2 years prior, council had approved a $30,000 expenditure for website redesign. Those funds were not expended at that time, but instead were returned to the general broad coffers, if you will, reserves of the township. So what we're proposing to do is to take the money that we have budgeted for 2019, apply it towards the website redesign project. In 2020, we're looking at collecting another like amount, included that in the budget, and have the website completed in early first quarter, hopefully, of 2020. The project is all encompassing. There are some optional elements above and beyond what a basic website redesign includes. And one of the options that I'll draw to your attention is the possibility of a focus group exercise where we could have the company actually sit down with a broader cross section of the community to gain input about elements of the website or a design of the website that will make it easier for perhaps laypersons or people who aren't familiar with our operations to be able to access information. The focus groups would entail a number of meetings, both internally with staff, with members of council, and again with this broader community representation. And staff actually went back and were thinking about how best accomplish that in the event that this option were selected, and identified that you are currently in the midst of recruiting for a community engagement committee, and that could be one of perhaps the first tasks assigned to the community engagement committee to provide input into the website redesign process. So if that is an option that council might consider, that adds approximately $2,500 to that base amount of $22,100 previously identified. The only other element of note is that eSolutions, the group being proposed, the preferred partner with AMO, utilizes a cloud-based model for its website, which means that rather than storing all the website content locally, it's cloud-based on their servers in a very highly protected environment, similar to what banks and finance companies use for their websites and their monetary transactions. So what that will do is have the effect of reducing traffic into our local servers, reducing the bandwidth that we need here to dish out the website when we get requests from members of the public. So that is a regular ongoing maintenance cost of about $4,500 a year, all services included. So at this stage, as I said, staff are recommending that council proceed with website redesign to the AMO preferred partner eSolutions for a total amount of $22,100 plus whatever other costs council wants to consider. For example, whether we want to do the focus group exercise. I'll answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Will. And I believe on top of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was not eSolutions, it is the AMO preferred. And is it not already being used by 350 other municipalities in Canada? So it's well proven. I'm not sure exactly how many. It's a lot of municipalities have jumped on board with this company. I sat in on that conversation. I was very impressed with the information. I asked some security questions, and the answers were all really good. And so I can see why AMO, municipalities of Ontario, have chosen them as their preferred deliverer of internet service. And so we've looked at going straight to them as the preferred. So discussion, questions, please. Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. It's kind of exciting to see that we can get a project that's going to be timed perfectly for us, so thank you for that. In terms of the add-on, the 2,500, it's generally very prudent to do as much as you can with your requirements up front. So anybody buying software packages, implementation's always easier and smoother, and you'll get a longer return on any kind of upfront requirement type of investment. So that's not an unreasonable amount for the capital or the purchase part. So second is, I should know this, but is this a capital then spend for us, I think, for the other half next?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it's not.
Okay.
Just by the nature of the project, it's an operating type expense.
Thank you. May I continue then? Thank you. So I think you mentioned that there's well, in the report, I think there's an annual fee. So maybe two questions about that. Is that something that breaks down into smaller bits? Like, is that negotiable, or can we do that contract for a set period of time? So it's sort of like a little budget meeting that we're having here. And then the other one, I think you said we're going to have a capacity savings. So it's almost offset. Okay, so don't bother answering that first part. That's a great piece of information. So it's that sells itself. And then this is a big strategic solution for us. So we are saying we want to have more engagement. So I would like to see what other little bits there might be. If we commit to the one add-on tonight, does that stop us from doing another add-on in 2020? Like, when would they have to decide there's another piece that we might add on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly work with the company, and I think it's right up until the end of our sort of design phase, which would be the end of the quarter, say next year, where we could, for example, add on additional features or design elements that are detailed in the report. So, for example, landing pages and that sort of thing. If we want to really build up the website, we can add those further on in the process if necessary.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor McCollum?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Will. Is there an annual maintenance package that you can buy, like, so we buy it for 10 years or 12 years so we know this thing is taken care of and they don't leave us high and dry?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, not per se. In the quotation that they provided, there is a fixed no increase annual rate associated with the hosting, and that hosting fee includes all necessary upgrades to software to make sure that it's, for example, compatible with any new devices that might be coming out. Again, currently our website is friendly enough if you're using a home computer, but once you start using tablets or iPhones or other mobile devices, that functionality drops off very quickly. So part of the sort of contract, if you will, that we have with the provider as proposed is that that $4,500 a year hosting will also ensure that the website remains compatible with any new devices or updates. So, for example, Apple updates its iPhone and all of a sudden things stop working. They then will make sure that that is addressed within the scope of our existing agreement.
If I can, just,
Yep,
is
carry on.
there a time limit on that? Like, is that a 4-year limit that they're gonna do this for? With electronics, things change so fast, I don't wanna get holding a bag here.
Through you, I actually didn't bring the proposal with me, but I believe it's a 3-year term that we're established into, and then that's renewable from there on.
One of the contributors to the expense is the constant upgrading. for security. And those of us who went to AMO and took in the cybersecurity lecture, where small municipalities are being hacked and held ransom for $200,000 and $300,000 and $400,000. That is one of the things that it scared me when I sat in that lecture. I thought, wow, we must be vigilant on this. This is one of those solutions that will address that issue. It's probably, your point is taken, Councillor McClellan. I mean, it's an endless tube of money that could be going in there, and we have to be vigilant of that. But if we were to get hacked or anything like that, the cost of this is minimal compared to what that could be. Secondly, one of the reasons it's so expensive is the software is written for 4 platforms, so they have to write it 4 times, and it has to be able to be adaptable. So it goes from phone to tablet to desktop to whatever the other one is, and so that's part of the large expense to get it up and going. So interesting. It was a very good, interesting session with that fellow, and I walked out of there feeling very confident that it was a good platform. It was good. The fellow seemed to be straightforward and honest with all his answers. I asked a number of security questions, and he had all the right answers. And the fact that he's on 350 municipalities already, and it's based, I think, in Waterloo, and they're all like computer graduates from Waterloo. So it's a pretty impressive. Will, go ahead.
To build on that and further to the question, it is for a 3-year term, fixed with no increases over the course of those 3 years. At the end of those 3 years, they then come back with proposals for the next 3 years. So it's renewable, and chances are there will be a potentially upcharge in 3 years. Or alternatively, if technology prices drop and things get better, who knows? We'll see a price drop. But we'll see.
Thank you for that wish list there on that. Any other questions on this?
Just quickly,
Councillor Van Vliet?
who else in Niagara has this so that we can compare it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the Township of Pelham is currently with this company. I know the Township of West Lincoln is just in the process of their redesign right now and are moving to the e-solutions. I want to say Grimsby might be as well, but we also looked across the province, and there were a number of call them very user-friendly websites that we encountered province-wide that were based on the e-solutions model. So, yeah.
And one of the things I hear often about is that we can't find anything on your website. I hear that quite often. So this is, we're really excited about this, and hopefully we can move this forward. If not, we'll go back to the drawing board. So any other questions? Okay, seeing none, the recommendation is that this report be received, and that the provisions of the township's purchasing policy be waived, and that staff be authorized to retain the services of eSolutions Group, being the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's preferred partner for website development, to provide for an update of the township's website as outlined in the report. Is there a mover for that? Do you have a wish to amend it? Yeah, we have to move it first.
Sorry. Yes, I'll move that, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Crillon is moving it. Second, Councillor McMillan, and you had McClellan.
I apologize.
I was dealing with
caused
McMillan all weekend, so I apologize. Go ahead, Councillor Crillon.
Thank you. I'd just like to make the amendment, if it's agreeable, where we do reach out for the focus group section, because that seems to be, that will be an early add-on. So if it's appropriate to add that to the motion, we would add that. I would recommend adding that now.
Okay, discussion on that? To adding that amendment on, can you make that amendment, like formalize it? The amendment is to?
That directs staff to add the focus group component of the website project for the amount quoted in the offer. I'm not sure what the amount was. It was quoted approximately $2,500, but we'll use the original source. Thank you.
Okay, I have a mover for that. And Councillor, seconder then, Councillor Van Vliet. All in favor? I agree with that. It's good. Thank you. And so now to come back to the original recommendation. We have a mover for that already? Okay, so I won't read it again, but the amendment is in there. So move that, please. Councillor McClellan. Seconder, Councillor Cridlin. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, the Lakeside Fences, BESR 019-2019. And are we speaking to that? Our bylaw officer, Mark, will speak to that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and to all of Council. At the request of Council at the regular meeting on the 8th of May, we are bringing this report back to Council once again for your review. When the report was first tabled, 3 options were given, and Council had requested that staff bring back additional options for consideration. As a result of that direction from Council, staff took the time to research the matter further and look at many different scenarios to try to find additional solutions or explore the possibility of a more fitting a compromise to fences being installed on properties that abut Lake Erie. As Council is aware, the primary means to maintaining the standards of the community in most cases, simply neighbors' mutual respect for each other's privacy. If that is present and the lines of communication are open, the view and security can be achieved between both parties without the involvement of a bylaw. However, in circumstances where this collaboration breaks down and a bylaw is needed to provide guidance, the options provided for in this report may inform a bylaw change that is a fair compromise to all parties involved if a fence is to be installed.
Okay, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Cridland.
Through you, Mayor, first thanks to staff for taking the extra time to work out some other alternatives. My recollection is that we were looking for a compromise on this particular bylaw. So if that's still the feeling of council, then it looks like option 2 from my review is got the parts in it that would seem to be a compromise. There's a couple sections in there, so I'll maybe just kind of talk to it where it's got the privacy section being the 12 feet, and then it changes to the rest of the section beyond the privacy section. That second part, I would propose that then be only 4 feet high versus the 6 feet high. And again, it's explained very well in the staff report as to why it was originally proposed that way. And then the third part of it is stating that the construction of that particular part is open construction. And again, that is clarified in the option, in option 2. And then I guess probably to close it off would be that obviously everything that's already there is certainly grandfathered. So it's slightly different than what's proposed in option 2. I'm going to put that out and hope to get some feedback from my other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion on this? And what we'll do here is if we can build the motion on our screen here and come up with the proper motion for it that way. So between the options, we have some good discussion here. We can come up with a motion that meets everybody's needs and vote on it from there. So any other discussion on this? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, do you have the statistics on the responses? Like, I mean, I can see the percentages, but I need to know whether that's 10 people, 20 people, or 100, because I mean, the majority are calling for no change, but if that's 5.5 out of 10, I'm just curious how many people actually responded.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have those numbers. I believe it might be in one of the reports, but the last report that went in May, it should be in that report. But offhand, without searching for it, I don't have that number for you. We can get it for you, but I just don't know if it's readily available at this moment.
And just one more thing. So just to be clear, regardless of what decision that we would make on this issue, everybody and every fence that's currently constructed is grandfathered, regardless of what we do going forward. Is that
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have received legal opinion on that, and that is correct. If a fence is currently installed, we do not have the authority to make them modify it or take it down.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Van Vliet, go ahead.
I would agree with what Councillor Cridlin said. I like option 2. That way it provides some privacy in some open areas. I'm still receiving emails about fences. I don't know if anybody else is. So there is a bit of an issue out there. It's still, like I said, I want people to have their privacy, but the view is also a huge part of why people buy out at the lake. And again, it goes back to good neighboring, but sometimes that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. My one comment, I like option 2. My only problem or issue with that is the houses, some are built closer to the water, some are further back. If you're closer to the water and you put up 12 feet, you could be blocking your neighbor's view. If you've got 100 feet of lakeside yard, if you put up 30 feet of 12-foot fence, it's probably not going to bother anybody and you have more privacy. I know if my daughters were out there sunbathing, they wouldn't want to be in the open. They'd like it closed. If you have enough yard, and with this storm, most of us have been around in 2 lakeside houses, and there's a big discrepancy. They're not built like a subdivision 22 feet from the road, and everybody has the same backyard. So I don't know if there's some way, I don't know if, depending on where you're set, maybe you could have more privacy than open fence. I just don't know how we regulate that.
So here this evening, we are going to build the motion. We can get something written down. We can start to make adjustments to it and come up with a motion that suits everybody's needs. So we don't have to be afraid of making a choice right off. We're going to build it. We're going to amend it, make changes, and when we get to a point we're happy, then we go from there. Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, this is a compromise that we're trying to work with. I want to also acknowledge that the staff has done a great job in terms of efficiency in how this has been worked into the fence bylaw. When we sent it away, we asked for water yards, and this is extremely efficient. So when it comes to the privacy part and the run of the clarity, so again, we still have an enforcement bylaw that is by neighbor. So if it's suitable to also use it here, then I don't think I'm hoping 2 neighbors would mostly agree on what that section might be. So we are looking to put something on paper, and once again, we're reactive, not proactive. So if the councillor has a better mathematical, we're not wanting to get too much into that, but if you want it to be 15 feet or 20 feet, the idea here is we're preserving as much of the run as we can with the open 4-foot section. So we are trying to do a compromise here. Thank you.
Councillor Van Vliet.
What if we went with a percentage? Just instead of feet? I don't know how much, because I don't live at the lake, but I don't know how much of a percentage it could go of your yard I mean, your actual yard, how much you would use. So I'll look at Councillor McClellan for an info.
Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just thinking about this a little more. So if you have 3 houses and you're the center house, if your neighbor's houses are closer to the water than yours are, at no point should your fence go beyond 12 feet past the back of their house. So if you happen to be back, you could have 25 feet, you may have 60 feet, but at no point will it go more than 12 feet beyond the edge of their property. And just so you, there's a house, here's yours. So this one could only go the 12 feet, which is the same as what this one was, which is the same as with this. So this guy could actually put in more fence to have privacy, because, right, so, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and so why don't we start trying to build a bit of a motion here and on paper. I think Amber is going to start typing, and we can see what we can hammer out in regards to something that is acceptable to everybody. Is there other comments here right now? Okay, Councillor McClellan, will you start a motion for us, please?
Sure, so I'm gonna propose that no neighbor's fence should go, privacy fence should go more than 12 feet beyond the back lakeside side of a neighbor's house.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, would that be the immediately abutting neighbor?
Yes,
or
the 2 abutting neighbors.
Okay, so if the house one up beyond the abutting neighbor was in a different location,
So you're still allowed 12 feet, right?
fair enough, so,
Right, so most, and if, you're allowed 12 feet anyway. So if you have 3 houses and one's 5 feet further than the other, this guy gets 12 feet. This fence is actually gonna be 17 feet beyond the second neighbor's property. The one in the between, it just stays. Yeah, because the houses are offset. There's no straight lines where the front of the houses are, right? So.
Yeah, that's an excellent way to look at this. I think my only concern is perhaps it becomes a bit complex in the consumption of it by the public in regards to how we word it. So I like it. I like that idea a lot. I just wonder how we can make it so that the people building fences clearly understand, what their obligations are. Go ahead, Councillor McClellan.
So the question is, do you need a permit to build a fence?
No.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, you do not need a permit. You only need to call your 1-800 call before you dig for locates.
Okay, so I'm just thinking if there was a permit required, then you could show them, you could have a drawing, and you could say, here's an outline of what you need. If we don't require a permit to build the fence, then I don't know how we make everybody aware of it. But we pass a lot of bylaws that people don't.
Councillor Gilmore, you've been very quiet about this issue.
Well,
Comments?
I mean, it's a great idea. It's very complicated. And the last thing I want is the CBO or the bylaw guy out with his measuring tape going to everybody's house saying, here's a stake in the ground. You can do this. I guess I'm coming back to the survey. So option 2 is calling for, option 2 modified, I should say, calls for fences on the water side permitted with reduced height, which is the least accepted reply in the survey, from going from don't change anything to don't have anything to let's have them 11% at reduced numbers. So I'm back to being conflicted and wanting to just sort of stick with what we've got and get back to getting along, and because, and again, everything that's there, which is a lot, isn't going to change anyway. So I think in some respects, we're back to the chickens. because, you know, we're here because of, you know, a couple of issues, according to my recollection, that's how we're here, just like the chickens. So, I don't know, I'm sort of, I don't wanna get this great big problem that we have to all look after out there when maybe we don't need to. We go back to the mayor's opening comments about the chickens, and let's just figure out how to get along. But I still have to come back to this survey where it says that the majority of the people don't want any change. So I'm having a hard time moving off of that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and with respect to that survey, I did pull up the original survey, and there were 53 residents that participated in that survey.
Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, how many houses do we have along the lakeshore? Because 53 houses sounds like very few people participated. And to your comments, Councillor Gilmore, a lot of these houses or cottages that are up there have been there, and the people are now getting my age or older that can't take care of them, and they're moving. So the younger generations are moving in. So they want things different than I wanted or you wanted or my grandfather wanted. And, you know, it's a different generation. They have different ideas. They have different, they spend too much time on iPads and don't get along with people. So this is why we have this problem. So I think we have to put something in to give at least guidance on it.
Councillor Gilmore?
Thanks, Mayor. So if we go with option 2, as is written, you're allowing 6-foot fences, which is what we have now, just that a bunch of it is open, so you can't, I guess, drive your lawnmower on the other guy's side. So, and we're not going to make anybody change what's there, so I can live with that. I don't want to get it any more complicated than that. I just, like, I think you got a great idea. I just don't know how to execute it without it being this big behemoth that we got to figure out how to run. That's all.
Yeah, and I agree, as I said before, I mean, it's a great idea, but trying to bring that into place would be a nightmare. So, Will, did you have comments?
Just further to the inquiry about how many lakeside properties we're dealing with, 600 lakefront properties, according to our records. And once again, 53 of those 600 participated in the survey. Although the 53 that participated weren't necessarily limited just to the lakeshore residents.
So the response to that was only about 8-9% response of people that live at Lakeshore. So what's the appetite to do here, folks? Option 1, option 2, option 3. And we'll write our own motion. And Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. Again, yes, we can work with. I think we can work with option 2 from what I've heard. I hope it passes, but you know, with the 50% that didn't want change, that's okay. We're trying to work with the 50% that are going from no fences to a 6-foot fence. So I am trying to work out something where it does give, you know, it does preserve something that perhaps isn't written down. So if there's an appetite to do with option 2, the only modification is on the beyond the distance of 12 feet, open style, height of 4 feet. That's the only change on that whole option of option 2. So first paragraph, right there. So if that's is acceptable, I'd be prepared to make that motion after the discussion. I think everybody's done a great job in participating, so.
Okay, discussion then on Councillor Cridlin's comments. Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mayor. So if it's 4 feet, but it has to be open, who cares how high it is? Like, just leave it at 6 feet. And really, we're not gonna police this anyway. It's gonna be like everything else. If the two neighbors decide, you know what, I want a solid fence between me and you, it's gonna be solid, and nobody's gonna do anything about it. So, let's not reinvent the wheel. Just leave it at 6 feet so that we're not out there measuring, okay, you're 12 feet, now you gotta go down, and it's gonna be open, I can see through it anyway. The heck with that. Just leave it at 6 feet all the way. Okay, it says here it's supposed to be open, but if A and B say it's not gonna be open between our yards, it's gonna be closed, and they like that, it's gonna be closed. So, let's not reinvent the wheel.
Okay, wise comments. Councillor Van Vliet.
Just to play devil's advocate, if A and B are good with the closed fence, what happens with C? And they don't have a view. They lost their view because two of them decided that they want to put a fence up.
Through you, Mayor, C is gonna make a complaint, I guess. So if I'm B in the middle, I'm gonna negotiate with both A and C. And quite frankly, there's 600 residents there. Probably 400 could care less what we do. So maybe more.
Okay, Councillor McClellan.
I have to agree with Councilor Gilmore, because depending on what your seawall is like, you might be 12 or 14 feet above the beach. A 4-foot wall or fence may not really be enough. You may want to put a 5-foot open fence. And if it's a wrought iron fence or that type of fence, Eagle makes them now, they look like an old wrought iron fence, they're powder coated. You may want that there just for a safety precaution. So I agree with you. If it's open fence, if it's 1-inch rails or rods or whatever it is, it's not going to block your view.
Councillor Quillen.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'll take that as a friendly amendment and recommend then option 2 be our motion.
Okay, we need to write that out, so would you like to verbalize that?
Through you, Mayor, so it's exactly as it was presented by staff. It wasn't recommended, but it was one of the options that they worked hard to bring to us. So that's fine. That will certainly meet needs for visibility.
Will, go ahead.
Just to throw a wrench or question to you from staff, if A and B decide to build a solid fence all the way through, and C has no problem with it, and then B decides to sell his house to D, and D buys B's house, and D is no longer satisfied with the solid fence and files a complaint. So, if I could, it wouldn't necessarily be grandfathered once the bylaw comes in unless you provide so in the bylaw. So if that is your intent, then it should be explicitly stated as such, that if there is an agreement made between two property owners and subsequent owners come into play, then somehow you're going to have to accommodate that grandfathering within a bylaw, because a municipal act bylaw does not necessarily have the same powers of a zoning bylaw or otherwise with respect to that type of grandfathering.
Okay, so it's complicated here. Councillor McClellan.
So could we put in, if A, B, and C all agree, D comes along and buys it. If he files a complaint, he pays the bill, the new guy pays the bill to replace that piece of fence. That's going to cost the money. He's going to think twice about it.
I don't know about
We'd have to look at to that.
Enforcing
but
that,
if
so.
you are looking at some sort of built-in grandfathering moving forward, we'll have to sit down and scratch our heads together as staff to see how we can implement such a thing. That's all I was saying. I just wanted to flag that as an issue.
It's a complex issue, and Councillor Gilmore's comment about keeping it simple and keeping it as is worthy of thinking of, in my opinion. It is true that, people will build fences if there's not complaints. The enforcement action on that is difficult to deal with. So, option 2, I don't know, let me confer here for a second with the CEO. Okay, so what we're hearing is option 2 is the preferred. Is that correct? Is there anything contrary to that? Okay, so then we just simply go with a recommendation that this report be received and that the option 2 be adopted by Township of Wainfleet for the fence bylaw. And need a motion or a mover for that, please.
If I could, and could we also include some clarification on the staggered houses, and did we want to implement Councillor McClellan and his recommendation regarding fences in the rear yards, extending when you have 2 houses? It is complicated, but is that out now? Out now? And then the last question then is option 2, the grandfathering provision that I was talking about. Because, as I said, if option D purchases, grandfathering refers to legally compliant or conforming structures that existed prior to a bylaw coming into effect. If A and B come up with an agreement to permit a non-compliant fence and they're satisfied and there's no complaints, then it can't be grandfathered. Okay, fair enough. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Councillor Gilmore, did you have another comment?
Are we going to pass the confirming bylaw for this tonight? So in theory, we can throw this out there, and if before we do the third reading, we can get some feedback if necessary about where we're at. Like, I'm not sure what the urgency in the middle of November is at the moment now to move this forward. Other than some people probably have to do some rebuilding, unfortunately, but they're going to rebuild what they have there. So I don't think too many people are going to be putting up a new fence in the middle of November. So we could, in theory, just kick this down the road one meeting, wait and see what we hear about option 2, and then move forward. Or as long as we wait to do the third reading, we'll be fine too. Either way, I'd like to just push the pause button.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comments in regards to Councillor Gilmore's comment there? Probably a good idea at this point, because we're floundering a little bit here to come up with something that is viable and workable down the road. It is November, it is not fence building season, so I would suggest that we refer this to the next meeting, giving staff a chance to come up with some other proposals.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, staff are going to have to draft a new bylaw to bring option 2 in, so that will be coming back to you probably January, I'm thinking. So at that time, between now and then, there'll be opportunity for the public to comment, certainly.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking for anybody wish to make a deferral motion on this until into January?
Mayor, sorry, just to clarify, based on what the CAO just said, we don't need to defer anything because we're not going to get this back for for 6 weeks. So I think that if we're comfortable with proceeding to have them write up option 2 as worded, then that gives lots of time for feedback. So let's just roll with that.
So the motion should be something along the lines of receiving the report and directing staff to prepare and implementing bylaw in accordance with option 2 for presentation to council at the next available opportunity, which very likely will be January-ish.
Okay, that's just going on your screens there. So the motion is that this report be received and that staff be directed to prepare a bylaw in accordance with option 2 as outlined in the report for consideration at a future meeting of council. A mover for that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder, Councillor McClellan. All in favor, and that is carried. Okay, we're going to have FSR Fire Report 14-2019. I'll ask Chief Alcock to speak to that, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is the report of the third quarter fire department operations. So just kind of highlighting, I've broken it into sections. So through administration, we did have our 4 probationary firefighters complete their recruit training at the end of June, and they started responding with the rest of the firefighters on July 1st. We did post for officers' positions for stations 1, 2, and 3. We have appointed 2 acting captains for stations 1 and 2 with the intent that once the central station is combined, then we would know a little more of who we wanted for our full station captain. And then due to a retirement, we did have a competition for the captain at Station 3. Our recruitment for 2020 has begun, which opened up September 1st. On October 8th, we ran an open house. We had 16 in attendance. On October 30th, we conducted our written aptitude testing, which we've tested 22, and we will be conducting our interviews tomorrow. We have 10 scheduled. So that's good news for our 2020 recruitment. And as you're aware, we did ratify the collective agreement for 2019-2020 in September. Moving to Section 2, Fire Prevention Public Education, we conducted 5 public education events through the third quarter. We conducted 11 various inspections or investigations, and of those 11, 2 charges were issued, 1 written order and 1 verbal recommendation for compliance to the fire code. We did conduct a smoke alarm program. It was a door-to-door blitz, July 29th, and certainly you can see the details of the results of that, which did make some media presence in July, August. Speaking of operations, so if we go to Section 3, during emergency responses, we responded to 67 emergency responses in the third quarter. And as you can, so following up, there's the little chart there that kind of breaks it out by call type. Moving into apparatus and equipment, we did conduct our pump testing in September. We did have some failures. We're waiting for parts to be ordered. We did have initial repairs conducted on October 28th. We're waiting for more parts to come in. Once they are, then the trucks will be retested. It should be noted that Squad 1, the 2005 Chevrolet, there are no parts available for that truck, so we're trying to source out various options. But until that time, that truck will remain out of service as a frontline pumper for interior firefighting operations. It'll still roll as an initial attack apparatus for car fires, exterior fires, MVCs, so motor vehicle collisions, rescues, but it will not be a pumper for structural firefighting. Unfortunately, that is the downfall when we push our equipment as long as we do. which ties right into our ladder testing. So on engine 2, we did have 2 ladders from the 80s that have failed. They have since been replaced. They were delivered on October 4th. Our 2 spares also failed, and at this time, we're not going to replace them. We'll just purchase ladders as needed. You can see we've conducted our regular weekly training, and those topics are listed below. We have had 3 certified courses operated, 1 fire inspector, 2 incident safety officers, and 1 pump operator, and then other workshops and seminars that we've attended. And then in section 5, you can see our priorities moving into the 4th quarter. And then the attachments I provided, just so you had a copy of them, is our firefighter recruit information package and the application package that our recruits go through. So if there's any questions?
Okay, any questions from council? Councillor Cridlin?
Through you, Mayor, thank you. The report's great. I just noticed the information and the stats on open air burning. And obviously it would be seasonal, but is that something we could direct staff maybe to bring back a review of that bylaw? Again, it's not time sensitive, but coming up for the next season, we could have a review or a look at what we could do with that burn bylaw, open burn bylaw, and see if it's still working for us.
Absolutely. Our current open air bylaw is dated and has had multiple amendments through the years, and it's probably time for a renewal. Staff will certainly be looking at that with the intent to bring it forward before the open air season begins in 2020.
Thank you. Other comments? So the thing here that caught my attention was page 7. The equipment failure rate to me was alarming. And as the chief alluded to when we had a discussion about it, we're taking the old equipment off some of our old vehicles and putting it on the new vehicles that we're buying. And so we're running new vehicles, but with old equipment, and the old equipment is failing. So we as a township, we have invested heavily in our fire department and our firefighters, and we've made some great strides. But as you can see from that report here, we must continue to upgrade our equipment and our firefighting standard to do better yet. Part of the reason for our new fire station is the fact that as we buy new equipment, which is mandated by the National Fire Protection Association in Canada, the equipment is bigger, longer, taller, and does not fit in our fire halls. I still have some questions come forth to me about why we're spending so much money on a fire hall. And well, when your equipment doesn't fit anymore, you have to do something. It can't sit outside. And when you see the amount of equipment here that is failing the national standards that is required for fire vehicles, one leads to the other, and really there's no choice but to move forward with a new fire hall, with equipment to meet the standards. And I know the public in Wainfleet expects our fire department to be a good fire department, meeting standards, and to be able to respond and when needed. So that is just a comment by myself as to why we need a new fire hall, why we need to continue investing in our fire department. So, any other questions, comments on this? Okay, the recommendation this report be received for information. I have a mover on that, please. Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor, and that is carried. Okay, Public Works Service 14-2019, significant weather events. And I think our operations supervisor, Mr. Nan, who had done an exceptional job in the last week since the storm. By the way, I'd like to just simply commend him and his team on all the effort. They were out there for many, many hours. The man needs to go home and sleep. He's been working like crazy, and I've told him he's going to stay till midnight to do some paperwork. So the people of Wainfleet, we have an exceptional operations supervisor here and his team. So on behalf of council, thank you very much. So if you would like to speak to this, Richard, it'd be great.
Thank you, Worship, and I will pass your comments on to staff as well, because it's, I'm just a one-man, I'm just part of a team. So I'd like to start this report by apologizing for the executive summary. It starts off by saying that winter is fast approaching. Well, this was written before the storm that hit, so I have to apologize for that. But this is basically just to allow staff a little bit of leeway to declare significant weather events. The procedure right now, we have the opportunity as a municipality to declare significant weather events. And what a significant weather event declaration does, it suspends the timelines for us to meet certain minimum maintenance standards. During a winter event, storms, etc., especially a prolonged event, minimum maintenance standards requires us to clear roads, for instance, of snow within a certain timeline. But by declaring a significant weather event, it allows us to suspend those timelines until such time as we can meet those standards. It's basically a liability issue that they've recognized, and they've placed it in the Municipal Act for the townships to do this. The present procedure, if we wanted to declare a significant weather event, would basically be that myself and staff would be looking at and reviewing the roads. We would consult with the CAO. The CAO would then consult with the mayor, and we would have to call a special council meeting at 6 in the morning so you guys can vote on declaring a significant weather event. What we've done from a Public Works official standpoint is we all, during one of our sessions, we've discussed this, and we're all doing the same basic thing. So if the region declares an event and Port Colborne declares an event, but we don't, we sort of open ourselves up to some liability by not declaring it. So we're all on the same page. We're all on a mailing list, and we're all together on this. So, you know, in the report, it does outline the different criteria that we must follow in order to do that. So that's in the report. And the second portion of the report is consideration for confirming the authority of the CAO to close township services in the event that we have to, for the safety of our employees, as well as the safety for the public trying to access those services. So I submit that to you. If there's any questions, I'd like to.
Okay, one question or more, perhaps. Councillor Van Vliet.
No questions. I just wanted to echo what the mayor said, that you all did a great job during the storm, you and the fire department. I was out there on Bellevue Beach the morning of, and it was a mess. So you guys did great. I just heard wonderful things from everybody. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, so the recommendation is that this report be received, that council delegate authority to the manager of operations or his designate to declare significant weather events in accordance with the Municipal Act, and that council confirm the authority of the CAO or his designate to provide for the temporary closure of municipal facilities due to significant weather-related issues for public safety reasons. Mover on that, please. Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Cridlin. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, emergency control report. I believe Chief Alcock has put together a presentation regards to the storm and wishes to present that for public information.
Again, to you, Mr. Mayor, and all of council, this is just a brief overview of the storm that occurred on October 31st into November 1st. Just kind of run through. So just quickly by the numbers. So our first call come in at 11:50 p.m. At that time, it was for trees down and for flooding. In total, we had about 24 firefighters responding. In 24 hours, we had 14 calls. That were dispatched to us. We had 8 apparatus that were dealing with those. Between the hours of midnight and 2 in the morning, we had 6 calls running at the same time, so we had crews all over the township. At one point, we had used Station 3 as kind of a command post. We had staffed all trucks, brought all the manpower there, and then as calls come in, depending on the call, we had actually kind of attached ourselves with Hydro 1 and Enbridge, and we would send essentially what we would call in IMS a strike team. And they would go out, they would assess whatever hazards there were. If it was a power line issue, they'd isolate the power. If it was a gas issue, they'd shut the gas off. If it was fire, safety, that kind of thing, fire would deal with it, and then they'd return back to Station 3 for the next call. Continuing at that, so on top of that, we also had 7 non-dispatch calls. So when you see there, the Richard, myself, we toured the entire Lakeshore area as a patrol just to find out where else there was. If our guys were responding to a call, if they come across another hazard, then they would call that in and deal with it as they were out. So as a citizen hadn't called 911 for that. It was found by us. So in total, we had 21 calls for service in 24 hours, which is 10% of our annual in one night. We also had 6 public works staff called in, dealing with the various road closures and blockages due to trees down. Lakeshore Road was closed between Station and Burnaby for flooding. The roads were impassable. And we also had 2 natural gas lines that were impacted. One on Walnut Hill, a tree had actually uprooted the main, and another one on Bellevue Beach where the house was pushed off its foundation and severed the gas line. So that was just kind of the initial response. This one here just kind of shows the peak of the storm. Obviously, as I said, our first call came in at 10 to midnight. And as you can see there, the sustained winds were about 40 knots, gusting to 50 knots. And I don't know what that translates to kilometers per hour. I believe it's about 130. But you can also see the wave there. And at 1 a.m., the waves, we had a storm surge, which was the leading part of the flooding. But there were 16.4-foot waves on top of that surge. So some of these houses were actually getting hit with full waves on top of the wind, on top of the trees. And that's what, and you'll see I've got some pictures of the house that was pushed off its foundation. That is what caused a lot of the damage. So what we have here is just kind of a quick overview. So this is at the west end of the township along Lakeshore. So to the left of the map, you'll see is our the Wainfleet Haldeman line. And this is where we had severe shoreline erosion. We had the breakwalls fail, and the shoreline actually eroded right up into people's septics, their wells, and right up to their foundations. Moving along, so this is Lakeshore between Station. The center of the map is actually Side Road 18. With the storm surge that had come up, the lake levels actually followed the KC drain along Side Road 18. And you can see that we had some serious inland flooding that impacted Dreamland, Summerland, and Side Road 18. There was no evacuees at this point, but we did have to close Lakeshore Road in that section because it was impassable. Moving down, so the center of this map, you can see to the left, there's still a bit of the flooding, the same area that we just looked at, but this is Bellevue Beach, Beach Road East, Beach Road West, and Hill Avenue. A lot of the houses on Hill Avenue are to the north end of that, and the houses themselves weren't impacted, but the water levels did reach those homes. So that said, any of the homes or structures that were along Beach Road East and West were seriously impacted as they took the brunt of the storm surge and the waves. This is now looking along Lakeshore Road between Gulf Course and Rathfawn. They as well also took a lot of the storm surge and wave action winds, and we actually had to close this portion of Lakeshore Road, not due to the flooding, but we had multiple trees down on hydro lines, and we couldn't, their forestry crew was not putting guys in bucket trucks in that kind of wind, so they were just isolating the lines. We were closing roads if it wasn't something that we could deal with safely at that time, and resume our work in daylight hours once the winds had calmed. So looking at some of the damage, this is some of the flooding that had existed. Actually, the first top left picture was actually flooding from the storm that had occurred on the Sunday previously. So that was a house that's on Beach Road East, and it had flooded during the light winds and rain the Sunday prior, and that flooding continued all the way through to October 1st. The picture to the top right, that's a house on Beach Road West. To the nearest corner was pushed off its foundation about 4 feet, and the farthest corner was off its foundation about 8 feet. And that's also the house that severed its gas line. And then the bottom picture is the actual front wall of the house had been pushed in due to the waves. And then obviously the entire interior of the structure. sustained wind and water damage. This is just some of the shoreline erosion that occurred. You can see we had break walls. There was erosion under freshly poured patios. There was a beach well that was totally eroded around. And then you can see to the far right, we had break wall failure and erosion right up to the foundation walls of that structure. Again, so this is some of the erosion that occurred. To the top left, that's actually a poured concrete step that has been totally washed away, and it's right to the foundation of that house. The top right is just to the east of Long Beach Camp or Conservation Area. That was a patio that was flush with the beach, and the shoreline has actually been dropped 3+ feet. So all of these patios and decks and everything are now floating 3 feet above what used to be grade. And you can see there's a shed that had been flipped and rolled. So following that, township staff, we had a conference call with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, along with Fort Erie and Port Colborne. And during that phone call, there was discussions with regards to the potential for disaster relief funding, and it was recommended to us at that time that we reach out to the citizens and that they begin reporting to the township any damages that it sustained to primary residences. So we put this post out, we created the email so that way people could start reporting with the intent that the Provincial Disaster Assessment Team would attend. They did attend on November 7th. So by the time they arrived on last Thursday, township staff was able to compile a list of lakeshore properties that were predominantly primary, and then we were able to take those maps that were provided, and then the reports of damage that we had received through this email, we actually overlaid those properties on the map. So when the Provincial Disaster Assessment Team arrived, we could provide the maps of the properties that were impacted. And we also provided a table that outlined the address, the contacts, the type of impact, whether it was interior flooding, exterior issues, items that may have impacted private infrastructure, wells, septics, holding tanks, cisterns, private utilities. And then we also went one step further and added any potential impact. So if there was another storm to occur tonight, what would happen to those buildings? So in the case of a break wall that's gone or shoreline erosion, what would happen? If it's your neighbor's break wall that had failed, would that impact your neighbor? Would it impact you? So we took that one step further, and we're still receiving. As of November 7th, we had 40 reported impacts, and I've probably received another 20 as of this evening. So that's 60 of 600 residents that have reported along the lakeshore area. So our next steps, we've provided all of this information and continue to update the ministry with regards to any damages or impacts that come in. We're responding out with any information that we have and directing people. The intent with all of this gathered, potentially the minister will activate the Disaster Recovery Assistance Program for Ontarians, and once that's done, then the residents can apply to the province for any disaster relief funding that may be available as kind of a stopgap for those that their insurance isn't covering anything. The purpose of the DREO program as primary residents is it's not a replacement for insurance. It's to get people back on their feet. So where we're into winter, that their furnaces were impacted by flooding. They've lost appliances. Their beds are destroyed. That kind of thing. It's not a replacement for insurance. It's just to help people get back on their feet. And that's the purpose of the disaster recovery program. And that's kind of where we're trying to get to now. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, certainly I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you for that, Chief. Questions, please. Councillor McClellan.
You, Mr. Mayor, Chief Elcock. So the break walls, there's houses that lost their break walls. They may be exposed to their shore wells, haven't destroyed them. Does this fund help them? Because the next storm is going to take it all away because your break wall, your sheet pile wall, whatever is gone. Are these funds to help them? Because I've had a few people ask me that haven't lost their house or you know, the water didn't come in the house or wash the foundation away, but
So I can't answer what the minister will approve and not, but I will say that the disaster assessment team that came after, so they went to Fort Erie, then Port Colborne, then they came to Wainfleet, and they weren't really expecting the level of damage that we had sustained. They were more, in Fort Erie and Port Colborne, it was more municipal-related infrastructure. In Wainfleet, it was more private-based. So the shoreline erosion, typically the program wouldn't cover landscaping. And I say that loosely, landscaping. So shoreline erosion would fall under that. However, when your shoreline erosion eliminates your septic system and the septic is now in the lake, that's now impacting your residents. And so that was kind of a shock to them. They weren't expecting that. So septics, wells, beach wells, all of those things that they don't have to deal with on a city system or on a municipal water system. So that's not something that they were really expecting, and they haven't got an answer yet. They were taking all of this information back to the minister. There may be funding to remediate a lot of these issues, and obviously prevent this from happening again. Because I mean, there's limited land space for some of these places, and I know that one place we had toured, they had installed an $80,000 septic this year, and it's now gone. So, you know, you can't live in your home without a septic. And so that's certainly impacting these people's lives. And I think that was a kind of an eye-opener to the disaster assessment team is typically landscaping isn't covered, but this is more than landscaping. This is private infrastructure, private utilities that I don't think they were expecting.
Go ahead.
through you, Mr. Mayor, again, so has Haldeman Norfolk applied for this, like Dunville, Loban, out that way? Because I have been out there, and they're probably in worse shape than we are.
So I have been in contact with the chief of Haldeman. Unfortunately, our contact with the ministry, we are in central Ontario. Haldeman is in western. I don't know why the lines are drawn that way, so it's a different point of contact. But certainly any of the people that did report to us that are on the Haldeman side, I have forwarded all of that information off to our central contact, who will share it with the western. Haldeman is working through it, but what status they're at, whether or not a disaster assessment team has been there, I don't know, because again, that's Western Ontario.
I was just thinking the more the better, right? So,
Absolutely.
anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure many of the public are wondering, what's the turnaround time for receiving information about whether it's going to fall within the classification of a disaster? So did they give us any time frame?
I've asked and they have given me nothing.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you for the report. I guess to the staff, is there anything you need from council at this point on this issue?
None that I can think of at this time.
Okay, then we'll just have a motion to receive this, please. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, all in favor of receiving the report? The report is received. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Good report. Okay, and correspondence now. Draw your attention to Municipalities of Ontario submission to the Attorney General of Ontario regarding addressing growing municipal liability and insurance costs. Any questions, discussion on that? Councillor Cridlin?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So again, we're using our new process, so it's working, thank you. So I've asked this one to be pulled through. It was talking about liability. It's from the AMO, so it was a lengthy report, but I think it's asking for, support for smaller municipalities. I see that us being much more vulnerable than maybe larger municipalities for the risk that's out there for liability and for insurance. So it was really just to strengthen what the AMO has already done, and we've seen where other municipalities make a resolution to support something that we've seen come through correspondence. So I have prepared a resolution. Now I'm not exactly sure what happens next. It's up there. And if that's So put that on the floor for discussion then.
Yes, can you read that, please?
Okay, thank you. So from the correspondence, the council received the correspondence received from the AMO entitled A Reasonable Balance, addressing growing municipality liability and insurance costs, and that council endorse AMO in calling on the province to compel the insurance industry to supply all necessary financial evidence, including premiums, claims, and deductible limit changes, which supports it, and municipal arguments as to the fiscal impact of joint and several liability, and that the province establish a provincial and municipal working group to provide recommendations to the Attorney General, and that the Attorney General of Ontario be requested to conduct a full review of joint and several liabilities as it affects municipalities, particularly smaller municipalities with populations under 10,000. So these were items in the report that I selected.
Okay, I'll ask for a seconder for that, please. Councillor Gilmore. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. All in favor? And that is carried. And I draw your attention to the other piece of correspondence from the Marshville Heritage Festival. They are seeking us to waive the fees associated with their winter festival, and they're saying that last year they do not charge for this event, but ask that people bring non-perishable food items. In 2018, we gave to their they gave to our fire department for our Christmas baskets. Unfortunately, they didn't say what they plan to do this year. We did reach out to them to try to determine that today, but we're not able to reach them. But any discussion on that? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move that we waive the fees.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, we proceed to reading the bylaw. Okay, that bylaw number 73, 2019, being a bylaw for the maintenance of yards in the Township of Wainfleet, be read and passed this 12th day of November 2019. Any discussion? Mover on that, please. Seconder, Councillor McClellan. And all in favor? And that is carried. And we now have notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Cridlin.
Thank you, Mayor. It's just regards to fulfilling our municipal responsibility for the septic systems and inspections in our township under the Provincial Building Code Part 8 regulations. So I'll bring forward that motion at the next meeting.
Thank you. And Councillor McClellan, sorry I didn't see you there.
Yep, no problem, sir. I would like to propose a notice of motion that our Works Department be able to put load restrictions on roads. We have a road, I'll tell you the name of it, it's O'Reilly's Road. We paved it a year and a half ago. It's destroyed, and we have no means of stopping that. We need to get that. We wasted $200,000 because the road's destroyed, and we have no means of recovering that. There will be a motion before the next meeting so that we can control that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to go into closed. And item under section 239 2K, the Municipal Act 2001, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. One item, a matter pertaining to negotiations for the sale of municipal property. B, item under section 239(2)C of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. 2 items, potential disposition of land matters. C, item under section 239(2)B, D, E, F of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals, affecting the municipality or local board. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. 1 item, a grievance matter. And D, minutes of the closed meeting of council held October 22nd, 2019. That is what will be discussed in closed session. Have a mover for that, please? Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor. That is carried. We will now move into closed session.